I got you a loud, noisy, over-experimental, pretentious piece of shit. Where did you get a copy of Noisy, Pretentious Piece of Shit? Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Time for an album review, Me Without You, 10 Stories. These guys are a Philadelphia band, and if you've ever kind of sat alone thinking to yourself, hey, I would really love to get into some passionate, melodic, and poetic post-hardcore with heart-wrenching storylines and lyrics. If you said that, I would recommend this band's first 3 albums. Keep in mind this group's material gets more raw and aggressive as you go backwards through their discography, incorporating more elements of hardcore punk. But Me Without You's 2006 album, Brother Sister, is really the crown jewel in the band's discography. Easily their most blended effort right here, showcasing a variety of different styles, from indie rock to post-hardcore to folk rock and just folk music slathered in horns and accordion. And even though there is quite a bit of variety, it all is held down through this common thread: frontman Aaron Weiss's vocals. He's very overly emotive on a lot of Me Without You's material and will morph quickly from this just impassioned, aggressive scream to these whisper, quiet murmurs. And verbally, he will always be doling out these very sad and personal, ultra-personal, and sometimes extremely painful and detailed lyrics. Now, the band's next LP, It's All Crazy, was a pretty big change for them stylistically. Basically, Me Without You allowed the folkier side of their style to just overtake themselves completely. Not only was this album much more acoustic, but the lyrics changed a bit too, borrowing a lot from folklore to develop its storylines, and using some really folky rhyme schemes as well. Now, after the shift with It's All Crazy, we now have this new album, 10 Stories. It's a self-released LP, and I think a lot of older fans are going to see this album as a little bit of a return to form for Me Without You. It definitely rocks out way more than It's All Crazy, but does have its shots of folk music, just like Brother Sister. But the storylines feel nowhere near as heart-wrenching or depressing or really all that personal. And Aaron's vocal delivery to me for a great deal of this album is pretty subdued. Aaron does have his really aggressive and passionate moments, like on the opener February 1878, but for the most part on this thing, he is either straight singing or just delivering these spoken word vocals in his trademark murmur. A murmur that reminds me a lot of like listening to Slint. A bit of a detour, but whatever. Now, another thing besides some folk influence that Me Without You maintains past its previous album is just simplicity. Simplicity in its song structures. Most of the songs on here are pretty straightforward. You do have the occasional change in direction, the occasional surprise, like on the end of the track 9 Stories, where the track really changes completely, and I love the lyrics in this spot of the song. If the weather withers up your vine, Jacob knows a ladder you can climb. For the most part, this album is very hooky, like on the track Grist for the Malady Mill and Cardiff Giant. That folky simplicity is not really completely lost on Me Without You. And that would be completely fine with me. And in fact, it is completely fine with me. What ends up bugging me about this album is that, like the title implies, the lyrics, the story side of this album is pretty pivotal, pretty front and center. But the storylines for me with this band are just not that great on this record. The track EastEnders Wives for me is a prime example. There's lots of very pretty and flowery language being thrown in every direction, and the lyrics are telling a pretty esoteric tale, I would say. But I don't really get all that much out of it, and I feel that way about a lot of tracks on here. It's a very wordy rock record, but so many of the words are just not resonating with me, and that's it. To me, a lot of these tunes are just poetic, middle-of-the-road folk rock that is sometimes likable and sometimes underwhelming. I like that some of the tracks on here transition into one another, and it makes for a very holistic listening experience with this LP. Despite the fact that I am not liking a lot of the tunes or the stories themselves, there is most definitely an arc, a progression but honestly, I only came away from this LP loving just a pocket full of tracks. February 1878 is definitely one of the most riveting tracks on this album and a fantastic, attention-grabbing opener. The guitar riffs are great, Aaron Weiss's vocals are great, and this track and the track Outside of Fox Dream are about the closest to those post-hardcore roots you're gonna see Me Without You get to. Elephant in the Dock is a folk rock tune on here that has a big finish. And I love the storyline on this track, which I will not give too much away with, but it involves an elephant, a courtroom, a judge, an injustice. It's one of the few moments on this LP where I actually get something great out of the storyline. And the song Bear's Vision of St. Agnes is another folk-y tune that has a big finish as well. The end of this track is just a mournful display of chorus vocals, violin, and horns. It's a tearjerker. It is a rocked out version of a funeral march. And I love the last track on here too. Really the perfect closer for this album. All Circles, talking about how all circles assume that they're going to end up in the same place. But that does not happen without some stipulation. For me, this album is not bad, but it's definitely not winning my heart. To me, this album just kind of feels like Me Without You took indie rock and they took folk music, two genres these guys have been playing with in different capacities for a while, but they combined them. But it just ended up kind of removing the guts of both styles and just kind of drawing up a pretty bland combination of the two, I guess. I'm feeling a strong 6 on this LP, unfortunately. What did you guys think of it? I know there were a lot of people, including me, looking forward to hearing this album, but, you know, let me know. You love it? You hate it? Why? And what should I review next? Anthony Fantano, Me Without You, forever.